Hello, happy St. Patrick's Day to all friends of the Rosendale Theatre Collective. This is Ted and Howard, and we're going to talk about our Irish classics. We have selected four Irish classics to help celebrate St. Patrick's Day. And so before we start, though, I'd like to say a few words about my own trip to Ireland. My mom is Scotch-Irish, and so in the 70s, we did a roots trip to Ireland, and the first stop was the Aran Islands on the west coast. My mom had seen Man of Iran, Robert Flaherty's classic documentary about the Aran Islands, and my mom loved it. So we saw the Aran Islands. And the Aran Islands were great, but then I discovered that Man of Iran was, shall we say, not a documentary at all, because Flaherty had invented some sequences. In fact, he had invented, according to some reports, the last half of the film, because the bottom line is the people of Iran do not do shark hunting. And this, as we were looking into this series, we discovered this to be a common problem because the bottom line is that Ireland has not had its own film industry arguably until the millennium, when the European Union started supporting individual countries to produce their own films. So, and before that, all the major films done in Ireland were in fact done by British or American producers. And so this is some of the films that have been done are arguably very good and excellent films, but others are problematic in the sense that they show an Ireland that doesn't exist, like Man of Iran. So in this context, I selected a film called Ryan's Daughter by the British director David Lean. And most of you will know David Lean from Lawrence of Arabia, from Dr. Zhivago, and Bridge on the River Kwai, which are all recognized masterpieces, excellent films of their own kind. And then when he was at the height of his powers, he did this film, Ryan's Daughter, with a big budget. And this is a story which he apparently invented with his screenwriter, Robert Bolt. And it's about Ireland in the First World War, when there were what they called the Troubles, because Ireland was still, I could say, a British colony or British province. And the Irish were fighting against the British. And there was a British army that was occupying Ireland at the time. So there was real hostile relations between the British and the Irish. And Ryan's Daughter tells the story of an Irish woman played by the British actress Sarah Miles, who's a very attractive woman, a young woman, and she's married to an older Irish school teacher played by Robert Mitchum, the American actor, in one of his best roles ever. I think he's fantastic in this. And but he's not like typical macho Robert Mitchum. He's a very sort of formal, reserved school teacher. And so the story, she has an affair with a British officer who happens to be stationed in this village that they live in on the west coast of Ireland. And then because she has this affair, it's a small village, everybody finds out, and she becomes a pariah in the community because she's consorting with the enemy, number one. And then Robert Mitchum is put in this very awkward position because he, being an extraordinarily decent guy, he just hopes, he realizes that she's having an affair, but he just hopes that she's going to, the affair will burn itself out, as he says. And then, but that is not what happens. And then there's a subplot with the Germans smuggling guns to the IRA in this town. And so a lot of things happen. So I'm not going to give away the entire plot, but it's a very strange film because visually it has to be one of the most beautiful films ever made. It's shot by David Lean cinematographer Freddie Young, who shot Dr. Zhivago and Bridge in the River Kwai. I think he did. I know he did. After Zhivago, he did before. I'm sorry, before he did Zhivago, and I think there was one other one. But anyway, the west coast of Ireland, I have to say from personal experience, is one of those beautiful parts of the world. And you have beaches, you have cliffs, the light is amazing. And the one thing about the west coast of Ireland is that you have the Gulf Stream coming in, so the vegetation is really, it's almost subtropical. You have palm trees, you don't really get any snow, and even though it's cold, it's not winter. So so that visually, I mean, that you see, and this is where you have, I think they're called the Cliffs of Moher, there's the Ring of Kerry, and so it's basically a postcard for that part of Ireland, which is again one of those beautiful parts of the world. Um, but where the film sort of gets into trouble is that you have this grandiose presentation, I mean, this spectacular visual presentation, and then you have a soundtrack by Maurice Jarre, the French composer who did Zhivago, and uh, the basically the presentation is sort of out of proportion to the story being told, because the story being told is an intimate story between a couple of people, and basically you have the teacher and his wife, and then you have the British officer. So it's a, shall we say, a triangle, classic triangle situation. But the historical aspect of this that you have in Zhivago, which is the Russian Revolution, is missing. You know, the Irish had a revolution, but I mean, in the context of this film, it's a very sort of small, localized revolution, and obviously the Irish people hate the British, but for reasons that were well established at the time. But basically, the film is it's a small story, and it's basically packaged in a huge package, huge production package that is 4 hours long, or close to 4 hours long. And so you have an intermission, and you have an overture, and you have music galore, and so you could say that in a in a production sense, this is what you would call an overproduced film. I mean, it's like a, shall we say, um, a very sort of ordinary, tasty story, but with a lot of sauce and a lot of dressing and a lot of wrapping, and so somehow all this seems a little bit inappropriate. So there's a couple of really good things in it. You have Trevor Howard, who is a David Lean stalwart, plays the local priest. I think he's great, and he's the good friend to Robert Mitchum's character, the teacher, and Sarah Miles, the woman. Um, but I have to say, from an Irish point of view, and again, I'm a quarter Irish. Um, they're not really very. I mean, David Lean is not very kind to the Irish people in the film, and I think that they're basically ignorant and stupid, and very, shall we say, prejudiced and angry and violent. And I mean, for sure, the Irish people have qualities like everyone else, but I think that the film suffers a bit from this sort of, shall we say, English perspective or British perspective. And again, I think that's unfortunate. And then, of course, to give it, I mean, I'll give it away a little bit at the end. There's a happy ending because at the end, the Robert Mitchum character and his wife leave town and move on to a better place. So, but I really think that the film, in that sense, is it's worth seeing because it's, again, so beautiful, and the production. I mean, you have scenes of Atlantic Storm, which are really unprecedented. I've never seen anything quite like that before. And again, Freddie Young's cinematography is spectacular. Um, the production value throughout is spectacular. I mean, it's David Lean was a brilliant director, and technically speaking, anything involving action was it was really good for him. Um, as my colleague Howard points out, the British actor is playing the soldier. Her love interest is not. Basically, he's a non-entity. He has no. He's one of the most boring English actors I've ever seen, because usually the English actors are very good, and England has a ton of excellent character actors, and you can usually see them in Lean's films, be it Lawrence Arabia or Dodge Zhivago, And in this case, for some reason, he chose this guy named Christopher Jones, who's it was a cipher. He's a non-entity. Um, so that's a problem. And then there's a couple of other issues that you have John Mills, who got an Academy Award for playing the village idiot, and that's shall we say uh, nowadays I think it's a bit of a you would say that's a bit of a tasteless portrayal of a handicapped person or mentally handicapped person, because basically he's being used for comic relief. Um, so I would say ultimately the film gets mixed reviews, and I'm glad to say that one of my heroes, Roger Ebert, agrees with this. I checked his review, and basically I what he has to say makes perfect sense to me. I mean, it's a popular film. It gets high marks on Rotten Tomatoes. There's again no film quite like it about Ireland. So, but I mean it's I would say it should be consumed with a few pinches of salt, because historically speaking, it's not. I would not consider it to be entirely accurate. So, not as quite as big a whopper as The Man of Iran, but still, it's a bit one-sided. Um, and now my esteemed colleague Howard will talk about the second film in our series, which is also a British producer, but more contemporary, and it's about Dublin, and it's called The Commitments. Howard, it's all yours.
Okay. Hello, this is Howard Menikoff for the Rosendale Theatre, and I'll be talking about the 1991 musical comedy drama, The Commitments. The Commitments was based on a novel by Roddy Doyle. It was part of a trilogy called the Barrytown Trilogy. The other two books were The Snapper, which was eventually made into a film, and The Van. All three stories take place in the northern Dublin. This particular story is about a bunch of kids who form a band. Basically, the lead kid doesn't want to be a musician, but wants to be the band's producer and manager. And he goes through a series of auditions trying to scrape together what he would like to have is a soul band. The cast was predominantly amateurs. There were loads and loads of auditions of young musicians for the film. And one of the characters in the band is an older musician who supposedly tells stories that he played with Wilson Pickett and Otis Redding and people like that. And originally they tried to get Van Morrison to play that part. Van Morrison met with Alan Parker, who was assigned to direct it. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And the only character in the movie who really does not play the instrument he's playing is that character. All the other kids are actually playing the music that they do. It's a story of the adventures of a bunch of kids trying to form a band, the internal fights, the arguments as they approach success. Of course, they ruin their own success, by infighting and things like that. The movie was an Irish co-production with the United States and the UK. It was highly successful in Ireland. It was one of the highest grossing films in Ireland. It was somewhat disappointing internationally in terms of box office. It broke even in the United States. The soundtrack of the movie was sold triple platinum and made more money than the actual film. The soundtrack was so successful that the kids in the band, The Commitments, which of course was not a real band, it was produced by Hollywood, by the directors, they went on to actually become a band and tour. They made a second album of Commitments of soul songs, which also was a gold record and sold very well in the United States. So most of the profits was because of the music. It was generally well received, but interesting when Siskel and Ebert, if one remembers Siskel and Ebert from their television show, Ebert gave it a thumbs up, but Siskel gave it a thumbs down. And he thought that the appropriation of Black soul musicians by Irish kids who were not anywhere near as talented was offensive to him. That critique occurred. And of course, one wonders why a bunch of Irish teenagers singing soul songs would sell so many records in the United States one could easily have gotten the originals singing those songs. But nevertheless, the performances are wonderful. I thought the film was kind of a delight to see. And a little bit about Alan Parker, the director. Alan Parker is British, not Irish, although he made the movie Angela's Ashes, which, based on an Irish American's biography. He started off, Alan Parker, with no desire to necessarily be a filmmaker. He got a job as essentially an office boy in an advertising agency, and worked his way up to the point that they were going to shoot commercials because they had Cinzano liquor and Guinness, and he was doing beer commercials and liquor commercials, and that led him to a film career. His first big break was the movie Bugsy Malone. It was an American movie. Basically, he took a gangster story and cast it with all children. He thought that kids really didn't want to see Disney stuff. They really wanted to see gangster movies, but with an all children's cast. The movie was quite a success, and it led to him making the movie Midnight Express in 1978 about two young American drug dealers thrown into Turkish prisons. That movie also was highly successful. He then went to the United States and did the movie Fame about the High School for the Performing Arts. Again, another hit. He made the movie Pink Floyd, The Wall in 1982. And he did The Commitments, and then he made Evita, which was another big budget musical. He did Come See About Paradise, Angela's Ashes in 1999. He made a family drama some years before that called Shoot the Moon. And he made The Life of David Gale, a television production in 2003. And he won a lot of awards for the movie Birdie. So as we see, he's had a highly successful film career, and was quite interested in the music of this. So I guess one could say that I think The Commitments is a highly enjoyable thing to watch, especially if one likes soul music, and I would recommend catching it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. I have to say, I love The Commitments too. It's a real feel-good kind of film, and between the music and the Irish pub, the bar that they're playing in, I mean, I really enjoyed that film, and I can't really accept the Siskel argument about the appropriation, because imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and these guys, these are just a bunch of pub musicians who are playing music that they love, and they're not like, it's not a commercial operation. So yeah, no, I love The Commitments. That's good. So next up is on our chronology is a film by an Irish director named Neil Jordan called The Crying Game, a 1992 film. And Neil Jordan is generally recognized as, I would say, the greatest living Irish director. And The Crying Game was a really, really cool movie that I enjoyed a lot. It's for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a thriller about an IRA kidnapping of a British soldier who's played by Forrest Whitaker, and they kidnap the soldier, and he befriends Stephen Ray, who's one of the Irish terrorists who kidnap him, and then he asks Stephen Ray to talk to his girlfriend at home, and because he's afraid he's going to get killed in the process of this kidnapping. And sure enough, I mean, he's not killed directly, but then he's killed indirectly in an accident. And so Stephen Ray takes it upon himself to contact this guy's girlfriend and tell her basically how much the Forrest Whitaker character loved her. And so the kidnapping takes place in Ireland, Northern Ireland, and then Stephen Ray goes to London to see Forrest Whitaker's girlfriend. And Forrest Whitaker is obviously black, but and the girlfriend, we presume that she's black too. And but then and then finally Stephen Ray finds her. and he befriends her, and then eventually he discovers the real punchline, and that is that she is not a woman, but in fact a guy, is transgender. And so that's and the movie deals with this in a very, very intelligent way, I have to say. And it's it's a really excellent treatment of that, because what happens is the Stephen Ray character starts falling in love with her or him or whatever we want to call, and the character of Dill, and then that's again, they handle that extremely well. So, but the bottom line is that he feels that he has to protect Dill, because he's taken over this responsibility from her dead boyfriend, and this gets him into big trouble with his IRA friends, who want him to participate in a plot to kill a prominent politician in London. And so, so there's some action at the end. But basically, the film is a brilliant combination of these kind of what emotional and gender intrigues, along with just an old-fashioned thriller. And the acting throughout is excellent. You have, I guess, Forrest Whitaker, Stephen Ray. You also have Miranda Richardson, who's one of the terrorists. And I so the film was, I mean, a big, big hit. It apparently it was made for a few $1 million, and the international box office was 62.5 million in the US, which is a huge profit, and 2 million pounds in the UK. So the film was a big, big hit. It got nominated for Academy Awards for Best Screenplay, Best Film, and I think won for Best Screenplay. And the interesting thing is, when you find out about what happened when they were trying to make it, apparently they had real problems getting money for this, because Neil Jordan had done a couple of flops. The backers did not really have much faith in his ability to make something that would be a hit. And then also, when he actually got money, there were those who thought that the character of Dill had to be played by a woman, that they wouldn't be able to find a transgender person who could actually play the role convincingly. So Jordan had a big fight on his hands, but he fought it, and he got an excellent transgender actress to play the role, and named Jay Davidson, and she's great. And so the movie was shall we say, I mean, very avant-garde, and way ahead of its time. This is 1992. It was very much ahead of its time, and it deals with all these things in a very cool way, I have to say. So I really love the film. Interestingly enough, Neil Jordan's original title was, he had written a screenplay called The Soldier's Wife, and it was written based on a short story by Frank O'Connor called Guests of the Nation, which IRA soldiers develop a bond with their English captives, whom they're ultimately forced to kill. And the original draft had the character of Dill as a cisgender woman, but Jordan had the idea to make the character transgender at the premiere of his film, The Miracle, at the 41st Berlin International Film Festival, 1991. I mean, Jordan really had to fight for this, and it's, as the actor Stephen Ray said, if Jay hadn't been a completely convincing woman, my character would look stupid. The film includes full frontal male nudity. Davidson was filmed nude in the notable surprise scene in which Dill's gender identity was revealed. The film went into production with an inadequate patchwork of funding, leading to a stressful and unstable filming process. The producers kept searching for small amounts of money to keep the production going, and the unreliable pay left crew members disgruntled. Costume designer Sandy Powell had an extremely small budget to work with, and ended up having to lend Davidson some of her own clothes to wear in the film, as the two happened to be the same size. The film was known as The Soldier's Wife for much of its production, but Stanley Kubrick, a friend of Jordan, counseled against the title, which he said would lead audiences to expect a war film. So the opening sequence was shot in Leighton, County Meath, Ireland, and the rest in London and Burnham Beeches, Buckinghamshire. The bulk of the film's London scenes were shot in the East End. And yeah, I mean, this film basically made Neil Jordan's career. And I think it's of the films that we're showing in this series, this is by far the best. So if you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend it. And this is a film you can watch again and again and just enjoy it because it's so well made. As mentioned before, it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, and won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay. Yeah, and it won a lot of other international awards. Yeah, I mean, I strongly recommend this film. Without any reservation, and it's it's really, we have tons of movies around about the IRA and about the Troubles, but nothing like this one. And this one treats the Troubles in an intelligent way and actually in a respectful way, but it takes everything to another level. And I thank Neil Jordan for that. It's a great film. I give it 2 thumbs up. Okay. Howard.
Okay, I'll be talking about In Bruges, a 2008 black comedy crime film written and directed by Martin McDonagh. Martin McDonagh, this particular film won an Academy Award for Best Screenplay and a number of BAFTA, which were the British Academy Awards for both the actor Gleeson. The movie stars Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, and Ralph Fiennes. And it is about 2 hitmen who end up being stuck in Bruges in Belgium. And before we get into the plot of this, I want to talk a little bit about Martin McDonagh. Martin McDonagh, whose brother, by the way, John McDonagh, is also a film director. But Martin McDonagh, born in 1970, became extremely famous as a playwright long before he was a filmmaker, and in fact is the most produced contemporary Irish playwright, at least in terms of the Broadway and the London stage. He first struck pay dirt with the Leanne trilogy. The name of those plays are The Beauty Queen of Leanne, The Skull of Connemara, and Lonesome West. Again, all 3 of those plays were on Broadway and were produced on the West End. He then had another trilogy called the Aran Islands trilogy. And you might be interested in this because the first of those 3 plays was The Cripple of Inishmin, which turns out to be about a teenage boy who gets casted as a role in Man of Aran to play the part. That ran at the National Theatre in London and then went to the Joseph Papp Theatre in New York and was, again, a significant hit. It was followed by The Lieutenant of Inishmin, which was a follow-up play about bombings by the IRA. And the final play of the trilogy was The Banshees of Inisheer. He had other plays. The first play he did that was not particularly Irish was The Pillow Man, which was about a Grimm Brothers style story that won the Laurence Olivier Award for Best New Play in 2004. The Beheading in Spokane, another play which ran on Broadway, and The Hangman, which was about the abolition of hanging in Britain in 1965. He also wrote a play called The Very, Very Dark Matter, which is a rather dark tale about Hans Christian Andersen and Charles Dickens, and evidently some not so nice things about those 2 gentlemen in the film. He then became highly interested in becoming a film director rather than a playwright. Again, his plays are noted for its snappy dialogue, which is certainly present in these films. So his first film was In Bruges. It's a play about 2 basically gangsters, 2 hitmen who are sent to Bruges and they don't know why. And it turns out one of the hitmen accidentally shot a child while performing his hit. And evidently that was unacceptable by Ralph Fiennes, who leads the gang and believes that he orders his partner to kill Gleeson, to kill Farrell. And basically we see them living in Bruges, and Farrell hates Bruges, can't stand it, and Gleason finds it a lovely, wonderful medieval town. The idea for this came when McDonough went to Bruges as a tourist, and he thought that it was just the loveliest town he was ever in. And after 3 days there, he was bored as hell. And he said, I can't figure out. This is the prettiest place I've ever been in, and I can't stand it. I'm getting out. And he then said to himself, there's an idea for a play. So he took his feelings and made them to two separate characters. Anyway, the play, besides being extremely funny, is also quite violent. It's a black comedy about two criminals, and it's certainly an issue of morality and guilt and how you deal with these things. I will say he followed this up by a play called Seven Psychopaths, but his most recent film, which was, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which won a number of Academy Awards, including Frances McDermott's Best Actress Award. So basically, I think he's turned himself into a filmmaker rather than a playwright. But again, I would say all his films, the dialogues, it's just, I find, extremely witty, extremely intelligent, and just the dialogue itself is a show, but there's also the wonderful scenery in Bruges, and the plot is rather fantastic. There's also, I'm trying to think, it's also involved about one of the characters thinks midgets are very funny, and that becomes another story. So there's another subplot, but it's a film that I would highly recommend in Bruges. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. No, thanks to you, I saw that film, and I really enjoyed it. It's quite different from anything I'd ever seen before. I can't really categorize it, but when I was looking at the opening scenes, I almost you have these two characters, these two hitmen stuck in Bruges, which is an incongruous situation for them to be in from the start. I felt like I was watching a play by Samuel Beckett. It was almost like Vladimir and Estragon, and the dialogue, as you say, is really cool. I really enjoyed that. And then the plot is it's very well constructed.
It's interesting because McDonough said that he was actually a fan of Harold Pinter. And
oh yeah, Pinter too. You could see yes. Yes.
Right.
But I mean, he's a classic sort of dramatist in the sense that you can see these characters happening. Yeah, Pinter. Yeah, I can see Pinter for sure.
Right. He also was impressed by Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now as a film that inspired him to become a filmmaker rather than a playwright. And also in the film, you see Hieronymus Bosch's paintings and paintings of last year. It's a rather intricate and yet funny and tragic story at the same time.
Yeah, no, you have, I mean, a lot of sort of, shall we say, cultural references, but fortunately, he doesn't take himself too seriously. He keeps it light and moving, and things are always happening. And so in that sense, it's very hip, it's very cool. And yeah, I mean, Bruges, I mean, I never would have thought of making a movie in Bruges like that, because I mean, usually if you think of a movie in Bruges, it would be like a period piece or something like that, about a painter and in the 60s, a Flemish painter. But so in this case, I mean, you can see the city is beautiful, and then you have this. The basic setup, I think, is brilliant between with the conflict between the two characters. One loves Bruges, the other one hates it, and then of course the one who loves Bruges happens to be gay, and the other one is sort of like a would-be playboy, always trying to seduce every woman he meets.
And Ralph Fiennes plays a wonderful killer who goes through.
And Ralph Fiennes is a perfect sort of psychopathic boss.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no, in this sense, it's a very cool movie, and yeah, thanks for turning me on to that, because I didn't know that director at all, and he's great. And then Three Billboards was a big hit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it certainly got good reviews. I don't know how big a hit it was, but I think it's Three Billboards, right?
Yes, Three Billboards from Ebbing, Missouri. Yeah.
And that one, I mean, so that's one of his. So yeah, so in that sense, basically, I mean, you have Ireland, which is the country of all these great playwrights, and you have this great literary tradition, and between James Joyce and Samuel Beckett and Brendan Behan and could go on and on and on. Those are just the names that spring to my mind. But yeah, so and now finally, I think that the European Union, they're getting money for their own indigenous film production. So I think we can look forward to a lot of interesting things coming out of Ireland in the future, as they find their own, shall we say, Irish voice, which they've always had, but they just need to find it in terms of film production. So with that much said, I want to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day. Erin go bra. So thank you, Howard. So yeah, so have a good weekend and see you soon.
You too. Thank you. Farewell.
Okay, good.